Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The Big Crime Investigators at the Gustav Adolf Lutheran Church in New Sweden, Maine. In 2003, a mass poisoning there sickened more than a dozen congregants, killing one. Credit: Joel Page, Associated Press, by the New York Times, April 7th, 2020. All true crime stories start as crime reporting, often in the daily newspaper. Before the narrative is shaped for your streaming device, earbuds, or bookshelf, the facts are gathered by a journalist. What happened? Where and when? Who is the victim? And do the police know who did it? Any journalist who has covered crime has stories they can't shake. These tales can be harrowing, bizarre, or even, in rare circumstances, oddly inspirational. We asked our journalists to share the ones they still think about, even decades later. Ellen, Barry, Boston, Bureau Chief. Someone put arsenic in the coffee after a church service in New Sweden, Maine, sickening several congregants and killing one. I was sent up there in 2003 by the Boston Globe to the far reaches of Aroostook County. It was both quaint and horrific. Someone trying to kill their neighbors. Eventually, it emerged that one of the ushers had done it as revenge for losing a theological battle. As the population in that area drained away, two small Lutheran churches were consolidated into one. Identical to outsiders, the two churches had what was for them a deeply significant doctrinal difference. In one, the priest faced the congregation when blessing the host. In the other, the priest faced the altar. The poisoner had lost that battle. He ultimately killed himself. It was a grim story about the dilemmas of those stretches of our country that are losing population, having to let go of their particular identity. Have a true crime story to share? Tell us about the crime that haunts your memory. Feb 27, 2020. Linda Richardson, Senior Staff Editor. Travel. Eddie Brown began running in a snake-infested Florida swamp in 1952. In the 44 years after he escaped from a chain gang while serving a robbery sentence, Mr. Brown worked, raised children, and lived quietly in East New York. But he was always shadowed by the gnawing fear that his past would catch up with him. I covered his case as a Metro reporter in 1996. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about the chain gang fugitive, having recently read about the racial horrors of the Jim Crow South in Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. Eddie Brown's past resurfaced after he was in a minor car accident, and the police ran a routine background check that showed he was wanted in Florida. He was taken away in handcuffs. Florida initially requested his extradition, and New York law enforcement officials began the proceedings. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention before he was released on $1,000 bail. It was an immensely satisfying moment to see him walk out of the courthouse, finally a free man, as a sea of news photographers with flashing cameras and reporters, more than I've ever seen, awaited him. Dig deeper into the moment. Special offer. Subscribe for $1 a week. Dan Barry, domestic correspondent. When I worked for the Providence Journal many years ago, I often wrote about the mobsters who were very much present in that Rhode Island city. You knew that this was Social Club, this was Baby Shanks's cafe, and this was the place where Old Man, the boss, used to run everything. You also knew that two men connected to a certain restaurant had made a guy named Joe Onions disappear long ago, but had never revealed where they had laid him to rest. Fast forward to 2008. One of the men is dead, and the other is dying. The police pick him up on a nickel and dime charge and ask for the umpteenth time, where is Joe Onions buried? To their shock, he agrees to spill. I have strong ties still to the state, and when I heard about this case, it sounded like a short story about an old wise guy who decides to go out by doing the right thing. I had to write it. Nicholas, domestic correspondent, investigations. The century-old department store stands 8 stories tall, but looms even larger in the German consciousness. A short walk from the old New York Times bureau, where I worked in West Berlin, the luxurious shopping destination is a symbol both of Berlin's roaring 20s and the country's post-war economic miracle. So when I learned that there had been a jewelry heist, with the thieves caught on the surveillance camera, lowering themselves into the store on a rope ladder, evading the motion detectors, and making off with millions of dollars worth of jewels, I knew it was a big crime story on the biggest stage. My contacts in the Berlin Police Department told me that the thieves had made just one mistake, leaving behind a glove at the scene with DNA inside. A good story needs a twist, but a great story boasts two. The DNA evidence led not to a single suspect, but a pair, identical twins, identified as 27-year-old Hassan and Abbas O. The German justice system couldn't lock them both up, and each could claim the other did it. So, they walked. It may not have been the perfect crime, but it was a pretty sweet alibi. Allen Reporter. Metro. A Bronx man spent 25 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. Why? Because a witness accidentally took the police to the wrong apartment, one not 16, and the police arrested and prosecuted the man they found there. Fernandez, Houston, Bureau Chief. One night in 2006, a police officer in the Bronx responds to a fight at a White Castle. He rolls up and sees a man with a gun kneeling over another man in the parking lot. He tells the gunman to drop the weapon, but the gunman doesn't respond. The officer opens fire, and the gunman is critically wounded and later dies. The gunman, it turns out, was a fellow officer, an off-duty Bronx policeman who was intoxicated and had just been beaten up by a group of guys at the White Castle. It's the mistaken identity that gets me. You can freeze frame the shooting as the bullets in the air and study it. There are worlds upon worlds of fate, mystery, and human connection at play. These two officers worked at station houses nearly 2 miles apart, and yet here they were, drawn together in a few tense, confusing seconds in a fast food parking lot. As I wrote, in this city, people live their whole lives separated by such short distances and never once cross paths. I don't think the officer was ever prosecuted for the shooting. I think it was ruled a justified shooting. But how does a cop live with a thing like that and move on? Yes, 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 yes. Armando, Deputy Editorial Director, Syndication. Hi, 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 hi. This unsolved case in which 7 people, including children, were shot point blank during a robbery inside a bowling alley has been a cloud over a small New Mexico city near the Mexican border for decades. 4 of the victims were killed. A 12-year-old victim, shot in the head, managed to call 911. And no arrests have ever been made. I grew up in the area, and it has been a source of sorrow and local mythology ever since it happened in 1990. In fact, the brutality of this crime over a few $1,000s, the massive law enforcement response, and the fact that no credible witnesses have ever come forward to identify suspects, all we want to hear about a crime that haunts you, a story that shook you, your town or community, and possibly changed lives. We are starting a project that will deeply examine crimes around the United States, the kinds of stories that too often go untold or have largely been forgotten. The crimes can be solved or unsolved, decades in the past or more recent. The crime may have been violent or involved financial or political wrongdoings. It may have implicated law enforcement or corporations. We are particularly interested in stories that may have gotten local coverage or not, but didn't rise to national consciousness. Rainer Kelly's Murder Soulmate. People are fools. This was a thought he'd held on to since he was a boy, and it had held true for his entire life till that point. Even as Rainer drove on the roads of his favorite mountain range, he could only think back to the sorts who proved it to him. Those sorts of people he couldn't even be angry at The kinda idiots that got themselves lost in his favorite places. It wasn't as if he cared for any particular demographic. He liked to hurt them more if they were pretty, more so if they were tame. But he was always one for opportunity. That might have been how he managed his body count. Serial killers without a known type are harder to catch, as far as he'd heard. Though, considering how high the body counts were for easier cases, he had his reservations. It could have been how he killed. While he wasn't exactly messy, he didn't try to be fancy with his targets. He'd done it before. Long, drawn moments with strangers in discreet, abandoned places. But when all was said and done, he was careful. That. And he was a fairly big guy. He was a hard man to escape. Made his marks all the more foolish for trusting him. It wasn't all that late when he happened upon his next mark. A young man, inching to it, really, with a lovely mop of hair just by the side of the road. "Hello, sir. I kinda sprained my ankle. Could you drive me to a gas station or something?" The kid asked softly. He looked embarrassed by the entire situation. Raynor liked that, so he opened his passenger door for him. The kid was asking, after all. He watched as the kid arranged himself on the passenger side, careful to buckle himself in. The kid seemed a mite more cautious now, considering his ankle. Raynor started after that, taking his merry time since the kid wasn't worrying directions. "So, what had you so far out?" Raynor asked with a sideways glance. The kid had been looking out the window, contemplating something, before glancing over to him. "Oh, nothing much, just the scenery," the boy said. "Is it all right if I do some writing here?" "I don't exactly have a charging setup," Raynor said, still playing the Samaritan. The kid took out a small journal. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm a bit old school," he said, trying to look cool. He kinda did if Raynor were at all honest. Raynor could have driven with his eyes closed, but he still only looked over occasionally, seeing the kid scribble away on a relatively clean page in his book. "So, what do you like to write about?" "Bodies." "Oh, what kind of bodies?" he asked innocuously. "Anybody, anything." "Oh," he said, hoping for something more specific. It was well enough that the kid was mostly quiet after that. Raynor wasn't so over-curious of this next body. Couldn't be that clever this far out. Didn't stop him from being a bit disappointed with the answer, what they were, rather than the state they were in. He was still a bit mesmerized with the kid, scratching away on a half-empty journal he was never gonna fill. He wondered, like any man oughta, how the kid managed to see anything past his fringe. But it seemed weird to impose on something like that. That mop would be safe enough to cut when the kid was dead, if he was really in the mood for a trophy. Beyond that, it was the kinda night he wanted to take slowly. The kid was marked for it. Raynor liked to take it slow sometimes. "I still gotta wonder what got you out so late." "I thought I told you." "Oh, whatever," the kid whispered, before asking, "Is it all right to say I've got terrible friends?" "Well, hey, we've all been in bad crowds before," Raynor stated, He liked getting them out of the shell before the fun. Yeah, Rainer couldn't see where the kid was looking. I don't think I caught your name. No, you didn't. Be fair, I didn't catch yours either. Ah, I'm Callum. Let me guess. Your mom had a thing for soap operas? No, saints, actually, the kid corrected with a laugh. My mom had a thing for cryptids. Rainer paused at the non sequitur, thinking over what to say. He could be honest, tell the kid his name, hear that begging catch on his throat later. Or he could lie, make him guess. It won't matter if I don't know your real name, you know, the kid said, catching his apprehension. Rainer stopped to think about where they were, where the closest safe house was, before saying, No, I was just surprised. I'm Rainer Kelly. Because he liked the kid's voice. The kid was quiet after that, the only noise from the passenger side being the press of pencil to paper, the sound of a zipper. Then, as if struck by something, he felt a sharp presence through his leg, reacting with a hit to the face, which knocked the kid out. Without much thought as to the proper thing to do, Rainer pulled the knife out. Rainer felt his own hot blood flow from his thigh, and all he could think was, the little maniac stabbed me. He looked down at his leg, realizing that the kid, with all the luck, nicked something proper. He stole the kid's belt, since he was still out, and made a tourniquet. Frazzled by the entire ordeal, he decided to push the kid out the passenger side and step it to the nearest hospital. A night held up in the emergency room was an interesting addition to his night, just as the injury to his femoral artery was. It was a lucky break not dying from it, but the kid was still out there. He'd done something foolish, and while Rainer wasn't especially scared of getting caught, he didn't like being blindsided like that. It would be a while after that before he'd think of it again. When he cleaned out his car, Rainer, having killed on the go before, knew that anything could drop from a body: licenses, gum, IDs, and phones were some of the most incriminating. So he really couldn't afford to keep a dirty car. That's when he found the journal, the last thing the kid dropped before trying to get the drop on him. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, and while at once familiar in the light of day, he could see the character of its use. Kid was careful closing it before pulling that nonsense. And while his car had been a mess for a while, the pages were mostly clean. He flipped through, looking for IDs that might incriminate. And when he couldn't find any, he thought to throw it away, even without something concrete. The book was filled with the kid's writings, and being by hand, his composition and identity could be ascertained. It was the kinda circumstantial evidence detectives and juries ate up. With the car no longer in disarray, he could throw it out, forget about the one night where the tables almost turned altogether again. He thought of the journal, of his hands and head. This was all he was gonna have of that. And for once, amongst the dark thoughts and bad memories, he wanted to keep it. It was only then did he read it, page upon page of poetry. And though it was the simplest thing it could be, he was infatuated with it. The first page, dated a decade before, I am beauty. I am soft, a crooked rumble to strange human love. She wonders fondly, where are you, dear? While I am dry and rotting here. I am claws. I am fear, a hissing mess to his cruel intent. I am flesh. I am bones. The kid was killing cats back then, writing poetry about it even. Rainer was taken back to his first experiments, neighborhood pets, and the like he dispatched out of curiosity. Though the kid never wrote his age or full name in any of them, he could tell that it was quite a bit more than poetry. It was something he'd never thought to do. Write about them with this intense distance. Some were short and recent. I am small. I am buzzing. My life is sweet. My stripes are fuzzy. Inside, I'm soft. My stingers not. None are things the dead can flaunt. Before he knew it, he felt familiar with the kid, like he was more than a liability, as close as a journal scratched halfway through. It really was anything, anybody to him. I am lovely. I am strong. My tendons were cut. My fat is gone, lost beneath 2 or 3 feet. There are no feelings the dead get to keep. Rainer thinks, reading through Callum's poetry book, about that night and how it went. Every little lie that he didn't bother telling. How ready he was after saying his name. He wonders, what'll I do when I'm on the prowl again? Hungry for new pretty faces. How long before he thinks about the kid as just a liability again? And not the one that got away. Bloody hands. The night was pitch black because the moon was too shy to come out from the clouds. With a restless heart, I stood there, waiting for my brother. I knew what I am doing is a sin, but sometimes the path of sin is the only path forward. I agreed to this for Mom. She really needs my help. I broke the window. Come on, it's time. I have a bad feeling about this. Don't you want to help Mom? He always uses the mom card. Do I love my mom? Yes, I do. But that doesn't mean what we're doing is right. Because of his dumb idea, we're sitting right outside a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. A simple mistake could derail our whole plan. Mom needed money, and she was never going to ask me for help. But I wanted to help her. She has done enough for me. Maybe more than enough. Being a single mom in this patriarchal world is pretty painful. I know that. That's why I asked my 1 minute older twin brother for help. Never did I think he would come up with a plan for a heist to save the family. Mom will have a heart attack if she finds out about this. She won't know about this. I swear on Dad. He talked as if he knew what I was thinking. Whoa, calm down. I will go in. We never talk about our dad unless it's necessary. So I knew he was serious. He always comes up with all these stupid ideas that get me in trouble. But Mom thinks it's me who does all this. But this time, he might be on to something. But I think the same thing every other time until things start to go sideways. Yet, I was ready to take the chance. One more time. I opened the door and went inside the dark kitchen. The whole place was filled with a foul smell. If my expert brother is correct, a man lives in this house alone with a priceless gold chain of his ancestors. Many have seen him roaming around in his courtyard with the chain around his neck. I just have to find him, sedate him with chloroform, and steal the chain. If I am lucky enough, he will be sleeping with the chain around his neck. Just take it and leave while slowly sneaking towards the bedroom. I looked back to make sure my brother was behind me. I stopped in the middle of the dark room when I saw a hammer in his hand. What's that? Nothing. It's just for protection. As I stood there, unsatisfied with his answer, the lights went on. The next thing I heard was a man screaming in fear. While I looked around to find the source of the scream, I heard a bang. A strange man fell onto my arms with a bleeding head. His helpless eyes reminded me of someone I knew. Dad? As I was trying hard to figure out what was going on, I heard my brother's voice coming from the door. With a bloody hammer in his hand, he was screaming, "Come on, let's go." As I started to run, following my brother, I knew things have gone wrong. I could feel the warmth of the blood splattered all over my face and clothes. Slowly, my vision began to blur. I could no longer see my brother. Darkness covered my eyes. I continued to run into the dark path in front of me. After running for some time, I reached my house. I got in through the back door, just like I did at that stranger's house earlier. I felt the guilt growing inside me. I should find my brother. I searched the whole house for him, but he was not there. Where has he gone? I need him. I tried hard to bottle up my emotions so I won't wake up my mom. She was sleeping. After working all day long for me, she deserved the rest. She needed the sleep. I searched for my phone to call my brother. I need him now. The eyes of the man began to haunt me. I could feel my mind going out of control. I couldn't handle it. The phone was not in my pocket. It was there. It was there when I went inside the man's house. It must have slipped out. I bit hard on my arm to feel some pain. I fucked up big time. Mom's going to lose it when the police come for me. She won't take it. She can't take it. I began to hear sirens from far away. Where is my brother? Where is he when I need him? I felt a sudden weight in my left arm. It was the hammer, soaked in warm blood. Wasn't it in his hands? I saw him run away with it. How did it get here? My head began to spin. I could hear the sirens getting louder. The police are coming for me. They will drag me away from my mom. They are going to make her sad again. I won't let that happen. She doesn't deserve that. She doesn't deserve any of this. Free her. Free her from the pain you will cause. The pain she is about to feel. I could hear my twin brother again in my head. He always comes up with all these bold ideas that get me in trouble. But this time, I think he is on to something. As I moved towards my snoring mom, I could hear the sirens nearing. I can't let them take me away from my mom. I smelled her beautiful black hair with the soothing smell of jasmine. I lifted the hammer as my brother told me. With a full swing, I bashed the hammer into her head. All of a sudden, the sirens in my head went silent. I stood there, looking at my hands, covered in my mom's warm blood. The prankster, Lennox, was the golden child to a set of loving mother and father who believed her to be the most auspicious thing that ever happened to them. They never reprimanded her for her childish pursuits, let alone denied her anything she ever wanted. An army of helpers were always at her beck and call. She pulled immature pranks and toyed with them to her heart's content. Her impishness was further encouraged by her parents, who laughed it off her as a sign of childishness and immaturity. Asher, Freddie, and Sarah were all Lennox's best friends. They belonged to well-off families and were as unruly as Lennox. They were all indifferent to the pain their actions might cause to the person at the receiving end. A boy named Austin was the current target of Lennox and her gang. Austin lived in the servant quarters along with his father, who was a driver at Lennox's house. He was a nerdy and ambitious kid who wanted to support his father when he grew up. Lennox often instigated him to join her gang, but he politely refused because he was aware of the activities they indulged in. This made Lennox despise him, and she decided to hit him where it hurts. She stole the extra key of the servant quarters from her mother's bedside drawer and located the books she often saw Austin reading passionately. She set all of the book on flames, which left poor Austin crying bitterly. This was just one incident of the many that followed. Once Lennox's parents shrugged it off as a mistake. With the passage of time, Lennox became more obstreperous and even started talking back to her teachers when they rebuked her for her rebelliousness. Her partners in crime always did as she said and supported her in her petty pursuits. One day, Lennox was playing catch with her friends. One of her friends dared her to throw the ball as high up in the sky as the overhead rooftop of the adjoining house. Lennox, being the competitive girl she was, immediately accepted the challenge and flung the ball with all her might. But the wall hit the glass casement of the house, resulting it to crash into pieces. Lennox had failed to complete the dare. She headed towards the house to collect the ball, fuming with anger. She rang the doorbell. It was answered by an elderly woman whose gray hair was neatly tied in a bun. She was wearing a thick-rimmed black frame containing bifocals. She gave Lennox a sneering look and remarked angrily, "You broke my window, you insolent little brat. You will never get that ball. Get out of here. Shoo!" She shut the door with a loud thud that made Lennox flinch. Lennox returned to her house with her cheeks turned crimson red with anger and embarrassment. Her friends, who bore witness to the whole scene, were snickering at her, adding insult to the injury. "I'll make the old hag eat her own words and beg for forgiveness." She vowed to exact vengeance on the poor old woman who was her next target. The next morning, Lennox and her gang hatched a devious plan that would extinguish the fire of revenge ignited inside Lennox's heart. They dug up some information on the old woman and found out that she lived alone in that big house. They had decided to make a fool out of the poor old woman by making her come to a realization that her house is haunted. They made their way towards the old woman's house in order to execute their seemingly flawless plan. Everyone hid behind the car, parked right outside the house. According to the plan, Asher ran towards the house and rang the doorbell as many times as he possibly could, and Quickie joined his friends, who were hiding behind the car. A few minutes later, the old woman poked her head out of the gate and muttered something under her breath when she didn't find anyone standing on the other side of the door. She shut the door with all her might, which made a loud, banging sound. Lennox felt amused at her frustration. This process was repeated thrice till the old woman was heaving tiresome breaths and sat on the pavement outside the house with beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She bent down and struggled to pick up her staff, which showed clear signs of exhaustion. A few moments after she went back into the house, Lennox declared that she would bang on the door this time, instead of ringing the doorbell. She headed towards the gate and started banging on the door with all her might. A few moments later, she heard a loud thud and the sound of a piece of wood falling on the ground. Curious to find out what had happened, she looked through the peephole of the gate and gasped as soon as she saw the old woman lying flat on the ground, along with her staff that had a significant tear in it as a result of impact with the ground. Lennox immediately rushed towards her house and narrated the whole incident to her mother in one breath. Her mother was shocked. "I am very disappointed in you, Lennox. I have always ignored your childish pranks because I thought you will eventually learn on your own that it is not okay to hurt people just for a few laughs." Her mother reprimanded her while calling the nearest hospital for an ambulance. The old woman was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors revealed that she had minor heart attack as a result of a strenuous activity. Lennox came to the hospital every single day to see the old woman, but she didn't have the guts to meet her. After a week, she finally found the courage to make amends for her mistake. She bought a colorful bouquet, a brand new staff for the old woman. When she arrived at the hospital, she came to know that the woman had left the country with her son, who had recently come from Italy. Lennox fell down on her knees and started sobbing. At that moment, she vowed to never pull pranks on anyone. She returned home and apologized to Austin and all the other people she had wronged throughout her life. Moral: in an attempt to satiate our ego, we often end up hurting people beyond repair. The chance of a half-dead man and Dr. Jane White sound filled the living room as Jane struggled to find her TV remote. Soft pillows scattered all over the carpet, leaving a minimal space for Jane to stomp around angrily. She never liked the white sound. Haunting as it is, Jane tried to calm herself and collect memories of where she placed her TV remote. Her hand slips into the crease and the fold of her sofa, grasping at the empty space in between. Jane moved her hand slowly to the corner of her sofa, and her hand finally hit something. She grabbed the object and surprised when she saw it was her remote, aging with the dust that had resided inside her sofa. Relief welcomed her as she turned the TV off. Something heavy still tugging at her mind. If she hadn't been working so late, she might not miss her favorite show again this week. A soft tune started to pull her way from her tired mind. Jane rise to find her phone. Ugh, again? Why do I keep forgetting my things? Her lovely mother would be laughing at her for such silly behavior a doctor can have. Jane suddenly misses her. It's been 5 years since her mother passed away. Yet her laughter and smile still here with Jane. She hopes it will never fade away. Jane lifts her foot carefully to walk between the messy pillows, focusing herself on the tunes from her phone. One missed call had waited for her before another call struck. Jane was shocked that her cousin was the caller, for it was highly unusual of Charles to call late at night. A wave of panic came knocking before Jane braced herself to pick up the call. "Hello, Jane?" Charles's voice was shaky. Panic surged through Jane completely. "Charles, are you okay?" Jane started to walk away from her living room. I need help, Jane. Can you come to my house right now and bring your medical bag? Please, Jane." A lightning struck her heart, and Jane ran to her room upstairs. "I'll be there. Don't worry, Charles. You're going to be okay." She hated to ask questions, especially the ones she knew she won't like the answer. Charles had a dire reason why to call Jane that night. They were close when they were kids. Their memories of childhood are blended together. Not a single memory without each other. Jane was driving at a high speed because the stream in her head won't stop worrying about Charles. She had tried to blur it out, just like every bloody wound she had to stitch, and every smile she had to put at the end of it all. She won't be okay at the end of the road for this, but being a doctor and a friend for Jane means more than her mental state. What become of it is that Jane can only feel the cold wind of the night. No more warmth. Every time she looked at the mirror, all she can think about is how dark her eyes are and what people might think happened to her when they saw it. Jane slowed down her car as she drives towards the house gate. For a businessman, Charles was very successful. Family and friends never knew what he was selling or buying to be this rich, almost drowning in his own gold, really. The gate automatically moved to open up a path for guests. Optical sensors and cameras cover every inch of the house entry, watching its newcomer every day. Authentic English patterns made the dark metals of the gate seem stronger, unbreakable. Solid walls keeping the vulnerable secrets safe within. Smoke diffused and expanded from his cigarette as Jane watched an old man waiting for her at the lobby. A familiar face running close behind him. Charles. Quick! Chandelier lights glimmer above. Its reflection made Jane's dark red hair burns with shades of amber. Jane rushed inside the grand house, certain of her steps, diving into the role of Dr. Jane again. Blood trails all over the white marble of the house. Charles lead the way into a dark hall, then down the stairs. The room was more like a morgue than a basement, or maybe a combination of both. Jane can't tell why Charles has this odd room. She was expecting a knife cut, or maybe a sprained ankle, rather than a grim room, that smell of blood and alcohol. Charles seemed fine and had no difficulties in movement when Jane saw him. Another man had been waiting instead of those images of Charles hurting. His skin was pale despite having a bronze tone. Bluish shade of his lips and under eyes removed the warmth of a living man. He had lost a lot of blood. Jane began to worry that he might not survive. Charles held the man's hand as he waited for Jane to prepare her kit. The mysterious man was bare-chested. Someone tore his shirt to press it on his wounds. "No, I forgot my suture. I can't patch him up." "I got it. Anything that you need. Here." Charles pointed at a small white cupboard not far from him. Through the glass, Jane saw a complete collection of basic surgical equipment. She stopped for a moment, wondering how come a normal businessman own a complete surgical equipment. Maybe countless times he had been in this situation. "Jane, hurry, please." The word struck like a punch in the face. Jane does not want to let her suspicion rise and get the best of her. The mysterious man needed Dr. Jane, and that is what he will get. Jane laid all the medical equipment on the table next to the surgical bed. One thing was missing from Charles's collection: the anesthetic. You don't happen to have any anesthetic, do you? Jane feared the answer to her own question. His ocean eyes moved from left to right in distress, trying to figure something out, debating a will within himself. A simple headshake is what he gave in the end. Jane tried to collect herself and keep a steady state, both for herself and Charles. She hates to see someone hurt, and she hates to be the one doing the hurting. There's no one in the room but the three of them. That gave Jane an unexpected relief. Slowly, and one by one, she overcome the surgery. Aseptic conditions before reaching for the gloves and mask. Deep breaths before examining the wound. A small pause before sanitizing it with iodine. The brown liquid trickled down from each side of the wound. His right shoulder was the first one she cleaned, then the one above the abdomen, a little to the left, almost to the heart. Whoever struck this man have planned the attack, explicitly to weaken this man before struck his heart. Jane examined the red line on his shoulder. It was clean. Very sharp object. Not too wide, not too deep. The angle of it looked like there was a struggle before the object wounded his skin. A gash under his eyes said the same thing, but the object seems to be blunt. Bruises accompanied his jaw and cheekbones. As the time passed by, Jane worried that his features will match his bruises. If she can be fast enough, maybe this man will live. Jane started to understand the rhythm of Charles's breathing. He was so still when Jane punctured the first needle to stitch the man's right shoulder. Then Charles started to ease up when she moved to the next wound, closing each bloody gap, step by step. All the hours spent at the hospital always meant something to her. It is not only to fix physically, but also mentally. People got attached to so many things in their life. Countless things. They can't properly heal until there is nothing left but the old traces of scar. As a surgeon, Jane always felt she fixed people, gave them a help to heal. Fixing and giving, that is all there ever was. Helping people to find their strength again, grow from their experience. She was there when a mother cried for her dead son, taken too soon after 5 years of battling leukemia. She was there when a single father decided to permit donation of his son's organs. The son died of car crash. She had failed to save their child, but she was there to help them heal too. She told them of how their child fight for them, thinking of their family at their last moments. There are times when Jane gave a mother her newborn conjoined twins, separated by surgery, but all well and healthy. They will have a scar forever, but that scar will be a reminder of their fight. even before they can remember. Jane had been a part of that. She was more than glad to be a part of that. Mother always told her to help people. Do everything from the bottom of her heart, genuine and certain. Believe that there will be a relief for every difficulty. As the last stitch sealed, Jane released a slow breath. She placed clean pieces of bandage over the man's wound. Though not as pale as he once was, the man was laying still and unconscious on the table. He might wake soon after this. Make sure he's hydrated. No alcohol, Charles nodded, his eyes distant. He's holding his breath, waiting for the moment when the mysterious man finally opened his eyes. Charles looks almost drowning in fear. Something glinted in his eyes, something Jane never seen before. One question: what happened? Jane hated the question. It would be easier for her if Charles just spilled everything. They both know it won't happen. Jane took her gloves and mask off, avoiding Charles's eyes. Still, she wanted to hear everything in its full truth. You know I can't. You don't want to get involved more than you already are. His eyebrows creased. Anger and regret rise up in him at the same time, waiting for Charles to open the door and release them. For so many reasons, he deserves to feel that way tonight. Okay, it's obvious, Charles. Her eyes darted to him. Jane realized tears had gathered in his eyes and slowly spilling out. What do you mean? Charles ran a hand through his hair. Memories, uninvited, flashing in his brain. If you're going to play Game of Secrets, so be it. There is a long and dangerous story behind this. Jane, sure of it. It is not her place to push Charles. A shallow understanding came for her, like leeches. Heavy for now, but light for later, she thought. He got some deep wounds. He barely makes it. At least, if you care about him, you'll need me again. What had the help meant? What was the urging reason for a woman to save a mysterious, half-dead man in the middle of the night? Something in her awakened. A warrior, ready to take everything by the tip of her spear. Jane saved a man. She will give him medications. Help him gain his health again. A chance to build again. Jane feared the chance will take chances. Can it be real? Had she just saved a criminal's life? What does the fixing and giving means now? Stream of thoughts had preceded her kind intentions, leaving the cold and soundless room behind her. Jane walked away. Cia Reyes. Murder case. The doorbell chime filled the anxiety-spilled air. Clemency and I both exchanged nervous looks. We both knew who it was. I walked up to the door while she arranged a few drinks. Oh, welcome. Mr. Wright? Please take a seat. I greeted the young man. He was wearing a blue suit and tie, left parted hair, and a shaved beard. Mr. Wright sat comfortably on the phone, glaring at the drinks in front of him, but did not dare to have one. "So you're Clemency Cook?" he asked, cocking a brow towards me. I left a foolish chuckle and pointed at Clemency. "No, she is." The lawyer's balls danced from me to Clemency's face while she stood near the dining table, trying hard not to blush. After all, Mr. Wright was a handsome youth. Mr. Wright adjusted his collars and asked Clemency to sit in front of him. He cleared his throat and began. "Your name is Clemency Bailey Cook, am I right?" "Yes, sir." The gentleman forwarded his hand and was replied with a firm shake of Clemency's. "My name is Ian Wright, senior lawyer from Rake Walker's. Am I right that you saw, He glanced at some papers and continued. "Sia Reyes being brutally murdered in front of your eyes?" "Yes, sir." "When did this happen?" "Around 1 a.m. on August 21st. What were you doing at such an odd time at Chargene Road, Memphis?" Clemency pressed her lips into a thin line and looked at me. I signaled her to spill the truth. The night before, my boyfriend broke up with me. So in tears and scars, I decided to hit the club. On my way back, I saw, Ian nodded, as if he had gone through the same and understood her pain. "Would you like to give some details?" I could tell Clemency was not liking this. She never wanted to see the lawyer. It was me who pushed her. As a responsible citizen, and of course, when you are innocent, you should not fear to reach the hands of laws. It is for the betterment of all. Clemency took a deep breath and said, "I was all head over heels with wine and was fumbling through the dark streets when I saw them, harshly stabbing the teen, while her screams echoed all around the place. The murderers saw me, but I was drunk, so they might not have expected me to remember anything. But that's what makes me different. No matter how unconsciously befuddled I am, I remember everything." Mr. Wright bent a bit forward. His eyes sparkled a doubtful glint. "Do you remember the Terminator's face?" "Yes, but I didn't know who it was." Ian took out some inked photos from his bag and displayed them all together, like a pack of cards. "Any one of these?" Clemency thought for a second, biting her lips when she finally pointed at a man's photo, disguised in a scruffy beard and smooth eyes. He wore dazzling spectacles and a cowboy hat. Hard to believe he was cruel enough to cut his employer's salary. Murder was far off. "Just one," Ian said, analyzing the chosen photo. "No, there were two, but you only have one man's photo." "Okay, we will work that out." Ian turned towards me and said, "Bring this lady to the court tomorrow. She will be a powerful witness." I nodded my head in agreement and waved the officer goodbye. After a few hugs and words of appreciation to Clemency, I walked the way to my house. "I'll pick you up tomorrow for the trial." My last words read, "Chanta. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Calling the case of the murder of Sia Reyes versus Charles Young." Are both sides ready? The judge's thundering voice alarmed all the ears. I have never been in a trial before, so it was all new. Yes, my honor, came a reply from Ian and his opposition. Your honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant has been charged with the crime of murdering a 17-year-old girl named Sia Reyes from St. Crim's School in the middle of the Sharjah Road, Memphis, on August 21st. Your honor, I would like to call my first witness, Alice Reyes, elder sister of Sia Reyes, for a few questions. Let Alice Reyes be presented in the court, the judge announced, thumping his gavel on the wood. Alice Reyes gets presented. I am so sorry about your loss, Miss Reyes. As per my information, you live with your... He gets uncomfortable for a second, but hides it with a cough. Late sister and your mother, about 60 kilometers from Sharjah Road. Am I correct? Yes, came a sore voice from her throat. What made her go to the Sharjah Road? She got a call in the middle of the night from his friend Charles Young, saying he had met with an accident and needed immediate help, and he did not know who else to call. Ian turned towards the judge and said, My lord, as you can see, Sia was cleverly trapped into coming to the Sharjah Road with a 60-kilometer drive without giving it a second thought. Objection, my lord, came a voice from the lawyer in defense. Objection sustained, said the judge. The person in opposition stood up and said, My honor, my client, Charles Young, did not call Sia Reyes in the middle of the night. They have not been in contact for a couple of days now. Here is the call, History of Sia Reyes, handing the bailiff the proof. The judge nodded as he went through the papers. My lord, I would like to call my other witness, Miss Clemency Cook, through which it would be clear that Mr. Young was involved in the murder, Ian said. Let Clemency Cook be presented in the court, the judge repeated, hammering his gavel. I was sitting among the public, and I could feel the environment tense. A small smirk played on Ian's face. So, Ms. Clemency, were you present on the Sharjah Road around 1 a.m. on 21st August? Yes, Clemency replied. I could feel every nerve in my body jolt up. I was really getting excited. Now that famous Charles gotta get infamous. I felt my blood screaming, yuppie, from the inside. It feels so good when guilty people get punished. Did you see Charles Young brutally murder Sia Reyes? Everybody's brows lifted up at the second. No, I did not see anything except a lifeless body lying in the middle of the street. I was left shaken. Ian and I glanced at each other in shock. What? But during our discussion, you said... Ian tried to protest. Enough. Any other points from any side? The judge yawped. The court fell silent. The gavel declared the adjournment of the court, leaving everyone standing in their seats, ready to get out of the courtroom. Clemency was smart to get out fast. but I caught her arm just in time and pulled her in a corner. "What was that? Why did you lie?" I said, trying to keep my voice low, but my temper was breaking its bounds. "What? Oh, right. Listen, girl, you're too innocent for this world. This world runs on money. I got paid for it. Now get lost. I have other work to do." A new voice inside of Clemency spoke. I couldn't believe she just said that, uprooting all my faith in law and humanity in just a couple of seconds. My eyes fell on Alice, who was staring at me as Clemency walked away. I was too shattered to face her. All I could do was mouth, "I am sorry. Thank you, everyone, for reading my story. I have never really attended any court session or have any idea how it works. It is based upon my understanding on basis of bits of information from movies and series. Please forgive me if my context is not similar to the actual process. Regards, Kea, Sins and Sinners. Secrets carry weight like lead. Iris inhaled the pleasant air, which was ripe with the dewy petrichor of the post-rain evening. A cool breeze ruffled the leaves of nearby lofty mango trees, all of which were well endowed with succulent yellow mangoes. The sky was shades of pretty pink and purple pastels, making her way down the narrow path between the tall trees. She recollected her memories with Dante, Isabel, Rhett, and Jax, running along the shore, pushing each other in the sea, and dreaming about sailing the world one day. They would stand and watch the sea crash onto the shore for hours, and it'd still never be enough. She remembered standing on the cliff with her friends and taking in the salty sea breeze. When the sun would set, the vast body of water would reflect the warm colors of the endless sky, and there hadn't ever been a more beautiful sight. She'd gaze at it for hours, fantasizing about unending aspirations and dreams. Iris traced the carvings on the trees she used to very much enjoy making, with scraps of metal and pieces of wood she mysteriously found every day. She suspected it was Jax, always doing these little things for her that could brighten her day. He could rarely say no to her, which led to them being part of quite questionable activities. She'd once said that she wanted to visit the yearly carnival on her birthday, and the next day she found the gleaming golden entry tickets of the carnival on her bed. She didn't really question where he got the tickets from, since they cost a lot, and he wasn't from a rich family. But she did remember him mentioning a friend who owed him a favor. Isabella and Rhett had been so jealous that day. Iris giggled, recalling the look on their faces as she ventured further on the narrow path between the tall trees. The pastel-colored sky started to fade away into the dark shadows, from dusty lilac to indigo and from indigo to inky black. A cool breeze blew, ruffling the leaves of the nearby mango trees, which were swaying to the notes of the wind. Iris shuddered, feeling the wind on the bare skin of her arms. She had half a mind to spend the whole night there, but even she knew it wasn't the best decision to invite the dangers lurking in the dark. Too lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice where she was keeping her foot. Instead of stepping on the hard rocks and stones, she stepped on the muddy soil. Her eyes went wide as she tried to grab a stray branch in hopes of regaining her balance. But down went she, and the stray branch, with a thud. Dear Lord, things just can't go right for too long, is it? Iris internally screamed, holding on to the bark of a nearby tree. She got back up on her feet with much difficulty and brushed off the dirt from her limbs. She looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars were in close clusters. But the full moon blazing in the sky was even more beautiful than the stars around. She smiled as she thought of the days she and her friends used to gaze at the moon together and talk about a fictional world that was everyone's personal paradise. Sadly, growing up had burst her bubble of believing that she could ever live in a place where the sky met the seas. With a sigh, she looked at the rich brown soil, padding around to look for her phone. Walking around in the mud, leaving her footprints behind, she heard a satisfying crunch. A shiver ran down her spine, and she visibly shuddered. Believing that the sound was of her own footstep, Iris took a step backward and crouched down. She started digging around in that area, throwing away the twigs, leaves, and lumps of soil she came across till she felt something papery. Scrunching her brows, she pulled up the small piece of paper from the ground and held it in her hands. The paper was tattered and torn from the edges and dust-laden with a tint of yellowish tan. She blew air onto it and wiped off the remaining dirt on her white blouse, leaving behind an unlovely stain. It's not like it is clean anymore, to begin with, Iris huffed. Squinting her eyes and looking closely at the paper, she realized it was a photograph of a younger version of Rhett, Jax, Isabella, and herself. Huge grins showing their crooked teeth and resting their arms on each other's necks. Those wonderful memories came rushing back to her. But the small smile on her face vanished as she remembered how her wonderful childhood had a terrible turn of events. Rhett had always been the golden child in their circle. However, he did have a mean streak to him. Envy rolled off him whenever someone else outdid him. Over the years, harmless cursing turned into aggressive shoving, pushing, and malevolent acts driven by hostility. He was at the point where he used to be jealous even when Jax, Isabella, and Iris used to hang out in pairs sometimes. Isabella called it a phase of extreme insecurity. Perhaps he felt that his friends wouldn't want to hang out with him if he wasn't the best. Perhaps he believed the quote, "Either you're something or you are nothing at all," a bit too much. Nonetheless, whatever it wasn't going to end well for him if he didn't change his unpleasant behavior. She'd contemplated on staying away from Rhett, but Isabella told her that they wouldn't want his situation to worsen. She had reluctantly agreed. After a few days, Rhett's birthday arrived. Isabella had decided to throw him a surprise party that would cheer him up. Iris and Jax helped her decorate, and all of them awaited Rhett's grand arrival. Grand was an understatement. Rhett had arrived, reeking of strong alcohol. Ignoring the presence of Isabella and Iris, he headed straight towards Jax and held him by his collar. His lips curled in disgust as he uttered some unmentionable words. Processing the enormity of what just happened, the girls ran towards Rhett to pull him away from Jax. But Rhett already managed to land a punch on the poor guy's face, escaping the grip of Isabella and Iris. He kept on punching Jax till his knuckles were bloody. Horrified, Iris grabbed the nearest object which she could find, which turned out to be an iron-made decor, and slammed it against Rhett's head. Ceasing his torture on Jax, he brought his hand towards his bleeding head and caught a few drops of blood on his fingertips. He felt lightheaded as black spots started appearing in front of his eyes. In the cold silence that followed, all of them could almost hear Rhett's last heartbeats as he closed his eyes, took his final breath, and fell on the floor with a loud thud. "He's gone." Isabella broke the silence, her eyes void of any emotion. "I'm sure he's in a better place now." Isabella continued, after no one spoke a word. "What have I done?" whispered Iris, tears threatening to come out of her eyes. It still seemed unreal. "You did what was right. You ended his reign of terror. Best he be dead than alive," Jax said, anger evident in his tone as he looked at the ghoulish body of his once best friend. "Why did he do that to you? Did something happen between you two?" Iris asked Jax. Not receiving a response, she prompted again. "Answer me, Jax. I can't live with the guilt, but at least I'll die peacefully, knowing that what I've done was for the right reason." Did he need a reason any longer to punch the shit out of his friends? Said Jax. "What happened between you two?" She asked for the second time. "Stop asking that question again and again," Jax said, his teeth grinding together. "Why? Don't you realize what has just happened? How can you be so... Iris was at a loss for words. "You know that's a bloody problem of yours. All you and your selfish nature do is present yourself as the victim. Stop making everything about you, Iris. Stop pressuring me. And it's you who has killed him, not us." "Oh, Oh, so I should have let him beat you to death, is it? That would have been better than this, said Jax, his eyes icy as he stomped away, as if her soul could bleed an ocean through the eyes. That was the enormity of Iris's sobbing. Isabella hugged her, slowly rocking her body as if she was a little child. Iris, he didn't mean any of that. He's just upset. Anyone would have felt that way, I'm sure. What you did, it wasn't wrong. It was inevitable. You freed him from the evil inside, consoled Isabella, who had been quiet all this long. How do you even understand 1% of what we're feeling anyway? You didn't do any of this. Iris laughed humorlessly. Rhett was the closest to you than any of us. Didn't you consider him your friend? Don't you feel the least sad about it? You don't seem to be grieving at all. Just because I don't express it does not mean I don't feel it. And Rhett was as much of a friend to me as he was to the rest of us. Would you rather he attain peace through death, or rather he continue inflicting violence and chaos on us? Iris didn't say anything afterward. The weight of the guilt was heavy. Despair was a crushing force on her chest, constricting her breath and coloring the world around her. Black as she too was slowly engulfed by the darkness. That is exactly how a tragedy like theirs breaks one's heart, making one believe that the ending might still be happy until the very last minutes. Iris flipped the photograph, returning to the present day, and read the words she had written a long time ago. Which of us could say we were more sinned against than sinning? Thoughts kill. I held in my cough as I entered the bathroom, senses already on high alert. Smoke unfurled around, blinding me for a moment. It took a second to gauge my surroundings, but once I had, it came as no surprise to see my older brother standing in their group. The only boy in here. After all, this was a ladies' bathroom. I watched in the mirror as the cigarette got passed around. A girl with pouting lips, caked in maroon lipstick, passed it to my brother. His lazy smile at her and the smoke around were in competition to make me nauseous. A familiar bubble of bile arose in my throat as he puffed out carbon monoxide. I clenched my nostril muscles, focusing on fixing my hair in the bathroom mirror. Luckily for me, I hadn't been spotted yet. They all started laughing as he did some kind of trick with the smoke. My eyes were so narrowed now, I could hardly see out of them. Once my hair was done, I walked over to the door, palm raised to open it, when a girl's voice said, "It's coming tomorrow," my brother's voice answered. "The LSD?" "Shut up!" the girl barked, leaving the bathroom deathly silent. I felt his eyes on my back before I saw them. Next thing I knew, I was slammed into the bathroom wall, inches from a familiar face. His lip curled. "Hello, sister." "Your sister?" the girl asked. She better not be a snitch. My brother didn't answer. I took refuge in the fact that I knew secrets of his that he'd rather die than let his friends know. Or that I knew he still had nightmares about Dad. Or that he used his blanket as a tissue for his snotty nose. His breath steamed on the mirror next to my head as he leaned in harder, earning a yelp from me as I felt his shirt button press in. "Don't let me find you in here again." I arched an eyebrow in response, trying to mask the turmoil inside. LSD? No way. "Oh, brother, should I tell them?" He read all his secrets on my face. "Go to hell," he snarled. I held out my hand in answer. He looked ready to spit on me as he pulled out a $5 from his pocket. I shook my head with a smile. He took out another. I took the money from him, squirmed out from the bathroom, and contemplated calling Mom. I knew Caleb drug dealt, but this? Everyone knew it never stopped at cigarette lull. It had only been a matter of time, and that night I gave the money to Mom with a too bright smile. "You know, honey, I don't need a commission from the money you earn. The job pays well, Mom," I said with a shrug, the lie spilling from my mouth like silk. She gave me a side hug, then carried on with her work. I lingered for a moment, at odds on whether I should tell her. But when I saw her eyebrows sink into a furrow, her lips into a frown, I decided that she had enough on her plate. When the front door slammed, indicating my brother was home from God knows where, neither my mom nor I left our rooms to greet him. The ritual had been long gone since Dad had left. Well, Dad's hello was more actions than words to Caleb. I can't deny that I hadn't felt the want to stop him all the time. Hearing his footsteps outside my door, a feeling of hate so red clouded my mind that I found it hard to breathe. Mum was at the epicenter of it all. Her money had all been stolen by him for the drugs he was addicted to, then played off as a fraud. I was simply recycling the money back to the owner. It was tough falling asleep that night, knowing I couldn't stop what was going to happen tomorrow. But even if I could, I wouldn't. I wanted him to hit rock bottom. That was the only hope for change for him. And maybe that made me a sucky person. Hell, the worst person. But it's what he deserved in my eyes. The pain I saw flipped on my mother's eyes when he'd come home drunk a few weeks ago was enough to make my fiery personality want to put a bullet through his heart. I avoided that bathroom at all costs on Tuesday. There was no way I'd be near choked again. I'd had to cover the bruises from yesterday up with a woolen scarf. In summer, I looked like a right idiot. School went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as a high school day in America can possibly go. And then I was home. I put my phone on D&D, the thoughts running through my mind, demanding instant attention. Being home alone was one of my favorite things. Just my mind and I. I sat on my windowsill, watching the city below me. There was something so serene in feeling the wind play on your face, to be isolated, but to also see hundreds of people below you, hustling around. I wonder if this is how God feels. I don't know how long I sat there for, but when I next opened my eyes, the sky was pitch black, and the city was now bustling with partygoers dressed in sparkling dresses with equally shiny champagne glasses in hand. I quickly climbed inside, wondering why my mom hadn't called for me yet. But then I heard a noise from her room. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had gotten, but it loosened as I felt her presence in the house. Caleb wasn't home yet. "Mom?" I asked, tentatively pushing her door open with a toe. I got a shock when I saw her bloodshot eyes turn up to look at me, tears streaming down and mixing with her mascara. I rushed to her side. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, a little forcefully, the panic already rising. Her eyes held mine as she whispered the words I thought I'd never hear. "Caleb is dead. Cat." The phone finally rang. It had been 5 days. The investigators said they'd call once they found out what had happened. "LSD doesn't kill," I murmured to myself over and over. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. "Hello?" I answered, words tasting weird on my mouth after not talking for nearly a week. "Is your mother there?" I passed the phone to my already crying mom, leaning in to listen over her shoulder. I only got bits and pieces. 5 minutes later, my mother put down the phone, hand still trembling. "It wasn't LSD. He didn't take LSD. So he took something else?" She shook her head, her throat bobbing as she swallowed a sob. "The supplier sold them a synthetic drug as LSD. I had one goal. One, to put that supplier behind bars for the rest of his life. Maybe that would take away the guilt that I practically killed my own brother. A life of regret." When Raj had stealthily installed the iSpy 200 Vision Plus device on his wife's prescription glasses 2 weeks ago, he had no idea the device would enable him to watch and hear from her perspective, in a way relive her last day alive. It was this morning Raj had received the Blue Dart courier with the pen drive containing the recording of the last day of Mira's life, her first and only day of wearing her glasses with the iSpy installed, just before the horrific car accident in which her car had been hit on the rear by another fast-moving vehicle. The police believed it to be a truck or a bus. Mira's Ford Endeavor had spiraled out of control and plunged into the river beside the road where she had drowned before she could be rescued. When her car had been pulled out, Raj had collected her things, including her glasses, and sent them to the technical facility of the iSpy Corporation in Mumbai, where the team had extracted the audio and video recorded on the device and mailed the file to Raj on a pen drive, along with a hefty check for their services. Taking a deep breath, Raj poured himself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, which also happened to be Mira's favorite wine. for he needed his courage for what he was about to do. 3 large gulps and soothing warmth in his throat equipped him the nerve to plug in the pen drive and click on the folder dated July 24th, 2021. Wondering what their 16-year-old daughter Hina would think of this blatant breach of his wife's privacy. Raj pressed the play key. The world came into focus with dainty hands, with black painted fingernails, placing the glasses over a nose. The camera panned to the left and focused on the other side of the bed, where a portly man lay sleeping, with his mouth slightly agape. Raj watched the laptop screen, with his heart racing, as Mira leaned closer and kissed his bearded face before wrapping her gown around her body and proceeding towards the bathroom. He paused and watched the affectionate gesture again, frowning. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't remember his wife kissing him in the past 3 months. Not since his near-fatal heart attack. Was there a corner of her heart that still loved him, even though she was cheating on him? Raj shrugged the thought away, and taking another sip of the wine, resumed playing the video. In the bathroom, Mira placed her glasses on the bathroom sink while she proceeded to undress and step into the shower. For a few moments, Raj hated himself for lowering the laptop screen. This wasn't why he was spying on his wife, and somewhere in his heart, he knew he was violating her privacy after she was dead, which made it worse. But then he lifted the screen once again to watch his wife bathing, still as glorious at 43 as she was 20 years ago when they had first met. Raj couldn't credit her genes for her fitness levels, for her 2 sisters were both overweight and looked 10 years older than their age. The credit was all Mira's. She loved swimming in the clubhouse and sweating it out in their backyard with her 10-kilogram kettlebell. With a twang of shame, Raj glanced at the tires of fat around his waist, which made it impossible to see his feet without leaning over. Maybe he deserved a wife who cheated on him. After all, he had completely let go of himself over the past 10 years. A factor, his doctor proclaimed, had contributed to Raj suffering a massive heart attack at 46, despite having no history of heart disease. Mira put on her glasses as she emerged from the bathroom and got dressed in a navy blue suit for her office meeting. Each Monday, she had a meeting with her boss, a man she detested but tolerated because it allowed her to provide for her family. As she combed her long, wavy hair and effortlessly styled them into a chignon, Raj caught his own reflection in the mirror on the chin behind her. A middle-aged, unshaven, unemployed man perched on the edge of the bed, wistfully watching his beautiful and successful wife, who was everything he wasn't. Did he feel resentful towards her? Was it her fault she had done well in her life, while he had simply failed at everything he tried? Was it love that still kept them together? Or was she only with him for the sake of their teenage daughter. "I'm going to be late today," she said, without glancing at her husband. "Today's the last date for the submission of the RFP response, and Kana would expect me to finish it before I finish my day." "How late?" he asked desolately. "Late," she said firmly, giving him an icy stare. "Eat your dinner if I'm not home by 8. I hope you can manage to feed yourself and Hina." It was more of a statement than a question. Raj heaved himself from the bed with much effort. "Let me get breakfast started. I'll eat in the office. Anyway, I can't eat anything before my Monday morning meeting. You know that." Through the camera, Raj saw his own sorry figure as Mira grabbed her purse and laptop bag and left the room without another word to him. She paused by their daughter's room, and after a perfunctory knock, opened the door and stepped in, closing the door behind her. Raj remembered sticking his ear to the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. But all he had heard were some muffled noises, as though they were deliberately trying to keep their voices down. It had started 2 months ago, when one night, Raj had woken up to find his wife's side of the bed empty and loud arguing noises coming from their daughter's room. As he had tiptoed to Hina's room, he heard his wife yelling, "Do you know how old you are? I'm 16. I'm not a child anymore." "You're just 16. You're still a child. You cannot do this." "I can and I will," the daughter had argued back. "I forbid you." And on the argument had fired back and forth between mother and daughter until Raj had stepped into the room and both had frozen and then sputtered an apology for waking him up. Docilely, Hina had apologized to her mother, and Mira had embraced her daughter. But Raj had sensed that it was just a temporary ceasefire owing to his heart condition, and the real issue between mother and daughter was not yet resolved. When he had probed about the subject of the argument, both had dilly-dallied without giving him the truth. While he appreciated their concern for his health, Raj wanted to be part of important discussions affecting their daughter and wasn't happy with being left out. Now he watched keenly as Mira stood facing their daughter, Hina, who was still in bed as it was early for school. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mira said warmly. Hina, a scrawny 16-year-old girl with crazy curly hair, mumbled a good morning from under the covers. "I was leaving for office. I wanted to talk to you before I go," said Mira, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hina sat up on the bed, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, Mom. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" Raj's heart swelled with happiness at the concern he heard in his daughter's voice for his health. While not the most affectionate or expressive person in the room, Hina did show her love occasionally through her gestures. Mira sighed deeply. "Your dad's fine. He's recovering, you know. We can't let anything stress him out." Raj thought Hina looked away guiltily at her mother's words. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" Mira pressed on. "Yes, Mom. Have you met him again? Outside classes?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure, Mom. Mira's gaze dropped to the bed cover, and her delicate fingers smoothed out the covers. "I know you went to his house on Friday." Hina's expression was that of a deer caught in the headlights. I went to his house to say goodbye," she stammered. Mira's sigh was deep and audible. "I want to believe you. Really, I do. But I can't. You've broken my trust, Hina." Hina was now almost in tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. But really, I had gone to his house for the last goodbye. I'll never see him again. Except at school, of course, where I can't avoid him." "Good. You know, once your dad is better, we'll do something to fix this problem permanently." Hina's ears perked up at the suggestion. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean, there's more we can do to fix this problem. I don't want to do anything right now because of your dad's precarious health. But once he's better..." At this, Hina threw the covers and jumped out of bed. "You can't punish him, Mom. It was my fault as much as his. Promise me you won't do anything." Mira rose, placing the strap of her laptop bag across her chest. "I'm not promising anything, sweetheart. Let's talk about our options in a few weeks' time. Until then, if you see him again outside class, I'll know right away." Hina stared at the wall clock behind her mother's head. "I won't see him like I promised." Raj's mind galloped to process the new information he had learned about his daughter. She had a boyfriend. Apparently, a boy from her class. Was that the reason for the strife between his wife and his daughter? Or was there more, he wondered, as he fast-forwarded the part of Mira's day where she attended her Monday morning meeting with her boss and worked in the office. Everything about the exchange surprised him because he was the overprotective parent, constantly worrying about every little thing regarding their daughter, while Mira was more of a liberal parent who allowed Hina to experiment and even encouraged mistakes, even though he thought it inadvisable for young people to date before 18. What Hina was going through was completely natural and expected. Why had his wife freaked out so much on finding out about Hina's boyfriend? Resuming the video from the point where Mira got into her Ford Endeavor after leaving office, Raj watched keenly as she checked her freshly applied lipstick in the rearview mirror and used her dainty hands to smooth her hair and tuck some wild strands behind her ear. She turned on the ignition and began driving in a direction opposite to where their home was located. When the police had questioned Raj about where his wife was returning from that fateful day, he had surmised that perhaps she had taken a detour to the market to shop for something for their daughter's upcoming 17th birthday, and maybe she had liked something but wanted to discuss with her husband before buying the gift. Raj wasn't quite sure what had prevented him from sharing his suspicions with the police that his wife was probably having an affair and was returning from a rendezvous with the other man. It was probably as a token of respect for their 18-year-old marriage and consideration for their daughter, that Raj had kept his suspicions to himself. With rapt attention, Raj watched the curve of the river hugging the road and the familiar city roads zipping past the fast-moving vehicle. As he expected, the car moved through the South City Market and towards the residential area next to it. Meera parked the car behind a dented Mahindra XUV 500, parked in the parking space, and stepped out with her purse over her shoulder. She rummaged through her purse for something, and apparently not finding it in there, she leaned into the car, opened the glove compartment, and extracted a pepper spray. With the pepper spray ensconced in her purse, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. The pepper spray confused Raj. If she was going to meet her lover, he'd have expected her to be rummaging in her purse for something other than a pepper spray. The heavy brown door was opened by a balding man with horn-rimmed glasses on his nose. Mr. Sehgal? Hina's physics teacher? Was Meera having an affair with him? She detested the man and had even argued with him over some marks after the first term examination results. Nothing made sense. The man's face deflated on seeing the visitor. Raj thought Sehgal looked shocked to the point of being afraid on seeing Meera. Surprised? Said Meera. Why? Were you expecting my daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. I know you've been having a romantic relationship with my underage daughter. The man inhaled deeply. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof. Those letters you wrote to her. I found them, and I immediately knew they weren't written by a boy, but by a grown-up man. How could you do this? You're at least 50 years old. You disgust me. The man's nostrils flared with fury. Listen, you can't come to my doorstep and accuse me of something I haven't done. You need to leave, he said, beginning to close the door. Meera's ring-studded hand stopped the door from closing. I am leaving, but not before I warn you to stay away from my daughter. If you try to talk to her outside the class again, I'm going to inform the police. The only reason I haven't already contacted them is that Hina begged me. She begged me to let it go, and... Meera paused. The man was peering from behind the half-closed door with his narrowed eyes. And what? Meera sighed deeply. And nothing. I'm not calling the police right now because of my husband, who is ill. I don't want him to know about this mess. But if you contact my daughter again, I'll have no option but to call the police. Raj's world was spinning around him. So this was what the mother-daughter arguments were about. Now that he realized what had happened, it made perfect sense. Why then had his mind jumped to the conclusion that his wife was cheating on him? And the reason Hina was arguing with her mother was that she had somehow found out about her mother's affair? How could he have been so naive to jump to a disturbing conclusion based on a mere happenstance? The only thing Meera was trying to do was protecting their daughter from the pedophile and protecting her sick husband from the stress of the situation. The sudden onset of guilt at suspecting his innocent wife of cheating on him and violating her privacy made Raj sick in his stomach. Having half a mind to close the laptop screen, Raj continued watching what was probably the last hour of his late wife's life. Soon, she would be on her way back home, and her Ford Endeavor would be hit on the rear by a vehicle that would send her spinning towards the river and to her death. Things seemed to be moving in slow motion as Mira delivered the final threat to the physics teacher, and leaving him with his jaw hanging, reversed her car out of the driveway, turning around towards her home as she drove on the highway next to the river. Raj kept his gaze on her rearview mirror, his heart racing. If he was lucky, he'd be able to view the plate number of the vehicle that had hit his wife's car and hand over the evidence to the police. With his heart in his throat, Raj watched several large vehicles on the highway approaching his wife's car, and some of them overtaking it. Resisting an urge to tightly shut his eyes, Raj continued watching the last few minutes of his wife's life. What must be going on in her mind at the time, he wondered. He regretted not telling his wife how much he loved her and how much he appreciated her supporting the family, especially since he had lost his job. He regretted every harsh word he had said to his wife, every missed opportunity to appreciate her, each occasion he could have been kinder to her. Thinking of their arguments, and every time he had raised his voice at her, made him run with shame. Was this his punishment for not living a purposeful life? For not living deliberately, but just drifting along the currents of everyday life? Raj sat bolt upright as he saw a vehicle he recognized approach his wife's car from behind. This couldn't be right. Why was the man following her? Raj knew the answer to the question a split second before he saw Segal ram his Mahindra XUV 500 into his wife's car and send her spinning towards the river. Water engulfed the world around him, and he saw the bubbles of air escaping his wife's mouth and nose as the water pressure shattered the windows and rushed into the rapidly sinking car, drowning its only occupant. At some point in time, the glasses drifted away from Mira's face and through the camera. Raj saw his wife's face for the very last time. Some of the guilt that Raj felt for violating his wife's privacy was washed away with the knowledge that he now had the evidence to bring his wife's murderer to justice. Wiping the tears from his eyes, Raj closed the video file and picked up the phone to dial the police. The mistakes we've made. Content. Warning. Some swearing. The only problem with breaking into your neighbor's house is if someone else beats you to it. The Mastersons are gone for the month, summering in Fiji or Acapulco or wherever people go when they're filthy rich and can afford to flaunt it by using words like summering. Before leaving, they'd asked me to watch their house. For free, of course. I smiled and told them they had nothing to worry about. It wasn't until their blue Bugatti sped down our dead-end street that I finally uncrossed the fingers hiding behind my back. Burglary 101. A good heist is all about patience. For 2 weeks now, I've spent night after sweaty July night sequestered in my stuffy attic with my telescope trained on the Masterson house, their backyard swimming pool, their organic vegetable garden, their novelty chicken mailbox. Think Rear Window. Only I'm not as handsome as James Stewart. Why wait so long? Because breaking into someone's house the first week they're on vacation is so predictable. And the second week, even less subtle. But the third week, no one ever suspects that third week, which is probably why, right now, during the middle of the third week, as I'm zipping up my black coveralls and adjusting my ski mask, as I'm stooping down to peer through my telescope, which has become a worse habit for me than day drinking, I can feel my heart free fall its way to the basement. Across the street, the shadow of a person creeps toward my neighbor's veranda. It's almost midnight. Everything is dark outside, like a chocolate cake when you don't bake it right, and the person shines a dim light in front of them. I hold my breath as they reach the door's smart lock. Their fingers bounce around the keypad with all the dexterity of a fat kid in a confectionery shop. Then the numbers light up and the door swings open and they slip inside the house. I wait a few more minutes, expecting to see a light bulb spark to life in one of the windows. When the place remains unlit, I grab my cell phone and a black hefty bag, and then I'm off, gliding across my house to the front door. Think risky business, only I'm not as smooth as Tom Cruise. I'll be honest with you. When I arrive at the Mastersons, fulfilling my promise to watch their house is the furthest thing from my mind. Really, I just don't want whoever's inside to take all the good shit before I get a chance. The smart lock keypad awaits my touch. My fingers move with all the dexterity of a fat kid running a mile. But the numbers still brighten, and the door swings open, coaxed by the passcode that I'd obtained after several months of attic telescoping. Inside, the house is as dark and chocolate cakey as outside. The scent of vanilla lingers in the air, sprayed every 15 minutes via one of the house's 1,000 automatic air fresheners. From the kitchen comes the sound of a cabinet being opened, wine glasses clinking. Using my phone's flashlight, I make my way toward the noise and hope whoever's in there hasn't yet discovered Mrs. Masterson's 60-piece bone china dinner set. I'm not sure what exactly you're supposed to say to someone who's hunched over and dumping a whole drawer of silverware into a burlap sack. So I aim my flashlight at their back and settle for a classic. Hi, how's it going? Nice and casual, not too confrontational, with a hint of politeness. Maybe I am as smooth as Tom Cruise. My words come as the last knife in the drawer hits the bottom of the sack. In an instant, the person drops both drawer and sack, grabs something from their waist, clicks a button. Blue light appears like magic. A thin strand of electricity crackles to life. Pointing the taser gun at me, she shouts, "Put your hands up, and don't fucking move." I'll be honest with you. I've always thought people who talk about love at first sight were full of it. But now, standing there in front of this woman, because there's no doubt the voice belongs to a woman, I get what they mean. Think of the most beautiful woman you've seen. Sandra Bullock, probably. Then imagine her standing there, pointing a stun gun at you in your neighbor's kitchen. Legs like a desert oasis, curves like a rainbow, brown hair flowing down her back as she straightens her trigger finger. Because that's exactly what this woman is like. At least, I imagine so. She's wearing a black latex catsuit and a matching ski mask that make her look formless in the veil of night, even in the taser's blue glow. Not 1 inch of skin showing. But sometimes, a voice is all you need to really know someone. That's how all my previous relationships have started, with a voice. And those were nice, while they lasted. Whoa, 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 I say, taking a few steps back and turning off my phone's flashlight to show her I'm harmless. I come in peace. Who are you? The words bubble like acid rain. My feet take another step back without asking my brain. The taser is still aimed at my chest. I'm the Mastersons' neighbor. I point vaguely in the direction of my house. She starts to close one eye like she's about to open fire, so I add, and believe it or not, I'm here to do the same thing you're doing. Slowly, finally, she lowers her weapon, so now it's aimed at my crotch. It's a small victory. I take what I can get these days. I want her to trust me, so I run my hand along the wall in search of the light switch. If she could only see the hefty bag in my hand, she'd know where we stand. At last, the switch pricks my thumb, and all at once, we're bathed in pure white light. Cut that shit off, she hisses. And it's like Jesus himself said the words. They sound so beautiful. And so is she, probably. But the light switch clicks, and it's dark again. She looks out the window, swivels her head from end to end of the sidewalk. Then she taps a button on her taser, and the blue crackling is gone, replaced by a regular flashlight, which she shines directly in my eyes. Are you trying to get me caught? Sorry. Unbelievable, she mutters, and crouches to pick up her burlap sack, leaving the silverware drawer on the floor. The sliver of moonlight from the window makes her look like an angel who's approaching the 60-piece bone china collection with my name on it. I rap on the wall twice, and it works. She stops, turns to face me. The moonlight reveals only the left side of her ski mask. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot, I say, peeling off my own mask with one hand and offering a truce with the other. I'm Mac, by the way. She stares at my proffered hand, like she doesn't want to contract whatever form of leprosy I have. The night air is a blanket, heavy and warm around us, filled with the songs of crickets and cicadas. We stand there, listening to the house groan under our feet. Above our heads, the ski mask feels like a dumbbell in my hand. This is usually the part where you tell me your name. No, the woman says, arcing her taser flashlight across the adjoining living room. She marches to the baby grand piano in the corner, no doubt trying to devise a way to wheel it into the night. Okay, I'll just call you Jenny, I say, following her. That was my last girlfriend's name, which is information that was supposed to stay in my head before my mouth sabotaged me. But now it's too late. The words bridge the space between us like a Chinese finger trap, binding us together as accomplices. She pauses, one hand poised atop a stack of outdated sheet music. Beethoven or Bach or Mariah Carey. Turning around, she stares at me behind her ski mask and opens her glossy mouth. It doesn't matter that she showed up to a robbery wearing lipstick. It doesn't matter that she almost tased me 2 minutes ago. My heartbeat quickens all the same, and my blood rushes to places where it probably shouldn't be. Slowly, finally, she says, "Shut up, Max," and dumps the music into her sack, Mariah Carey and all. And it doesn't even matter that she got my name wrong. She could read the yellow pages, cover to cover, and I would listen forever, falling asleep and waking up to the sound of her voice every day. So, yes, I shut up. We shuffle to separate corners of the living room and inspect our potential treasures. And let me tell you, it's the longest 5 minutes of silence in my life. But then, as I'm snatching a handful of angelfish from the Masterson's aquarium and tossing them into my garbage bag, curiosity creeps up on me like it's driving a free candy van. And I can't help but to ask, how did you get past the smart lock anyway? It took me weeks of watching with my telescope to get the numbers. I cringe hearing the word meeks, a hasty overcorrection, when I opted not to tell her how long my spying has actually been going on. Jenny scoffs from across the room, where she's trying desperately to pry a taxidermied deer head from its throne above the mantelpiece. Really? You couldn't figure out 1234? She turns and gives me a dismissive shake of her head. They're boomers. It's not frickin' rocket science. Another candy van question slips out. Why are you doing this? She sighs and stops tugging, but keeps her hands on the antlers. I'm just taking what I'm owed. That's all, she says. Her voice is different than before, softer maybe. I mean, seriously, these people can go to Acapulco for a month, but they can't afford to pay their employees a decent wage. So it was Acapulco, I murmur. You know something? I'd probably be home right now watching Netflix if Ed weren't so fucking stingy. Whether she means Mr. Edwin Masterson or Mrs. Edna Masterson, it's impossible to say. And I don't feel it's my place to ask. I see. What about you? Jenny has given up on the deer head, opting for the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf instead. They aren't paying you right either. I could tell her the truth, that the Mastersons have never wronged me, have always invited me to their cookouts and their Christmas parties, that I'm just a guy with too much time on his hands, all the time in the world, and something to prove, that I'm invading someone else's life tonight to try to find some meaning in my own, that I'm a spineless, indecisive loser, and I'm destined to let the world walk all over me. That last one is what my previous girlfriend told me anyway. Old Jenny. But that was 3 years ago. People can change in that amount of time, right? I would never have thought of breaking into this house 3 years ago. If that's not change, I don't know what is. New Jenny is staring at me, awaiting my answer. Yeah, something like that, I tell her, plunging my hand back into the aquarium. Figures. She flings a tattered Gutenberg Bible into her burlap sack. Hypocrites. Cat. Burglary 201. Always use the toilet before a heist. When I return from the bathroom, couldn't have been in there more than 5 minutes. The living room is abandoned. From the kitchen comes the rattle of a teacup and a saucer. And then I know this woman is no angel. In the kitchen, Jenny stands on her tiptoes to reach the top of the cabinet. She curls a few fingers around a piece of Mrs. Masterson's bone china, a white teacup with floral patterning. It is the penultimate item in the cabinet. What the hell are you doing? I say, as she lowers her body, cup in hand. My voice, louder than expected, ricochets off the now empty walls. Like a pinball, she startles, then slips her present into her sack. A reverse Santa Claus. What does it look like? You're taking my bone china set is what it looks like. Jenny shrugs and points to the lone piece in the cabinet. A plain-looking white saucer with gold trim. All yours. Have at it. No. I grab my soggy, hefty bag from its spot by the aquarium, stretch it as wide as it'll go. Give me half. The air freshener on the wall vomits vanilla mist as Jenny cocks her head. "So?" she says, nodding at the cabinet. "Do you want it or not?" "Half," I demand. She snorts and shakes her head. Done with me. Hauling her sack, she troops down the hallway toward the bathroom. I have to stop myself from grabbing her arm. The equation is simple arithmetic. She has a taser. I don't. The saucer is an orphan in its cupboard, waiting for someone to take pity on it. It's cool to the touch in my longing fingertips. My hefty bag is still gaping like a hungry, hungry hippo. But I slide the saucer in my breast pocket for safekeeping. The toilet flushes, and Jenny emerges from the bathroom, still dragging her riches. She frowns when she sees me standing there. "You know, I think I misjudged you, Jenny. You're not an angel at all. You know that?" Her laugh is like the curtains bulging from her sack, velvety and hideous. "Oh, I'm not an angel." Breaking news? More at 11. Her taser flashlight falls on my trash bag. "What? You think you're some kind of saint? These people aren't my neighbors. I'm supposed to be watching the house, actually," I confess. "That's really why I'm here. Mr. Masterson put his faith in me." "Well, you're doing a great job." Jenny opens a hallway closet and inspects Mrs. Masterson's collection of mink coats as though she's in a bookstore, contemplating life's hardest decision. Paperback or hardcover? Let me know if you need a letter of recommendation. My face feels like it's summering in Acapulco. The novelty of Jenny's sarcasm has worn off. Now it leaves me grinding my teeth. "Look, I'm gonna step outside," I tell her, tapping the imaginary vape pen in my pocket. "I need a smoke break." 10 minutes, max," Jenny commands, with all the authority of a Walmart manager. I'm still wondering if that meant maximum, or if she'd simply mispronounced my name again when I stumble out into the night. A hot, gentle breeze greets me on the sidewalk, a gift from the passing cars on the next block. My house sits across the street, pale and lonely and devoid of bone china. The telescope in the attic is pointed directly at me, watching. The Masterson's novelty chicken mailbox taunts me. They are all waiting for me to do what it is I actually came out here for. Why not? Why not fulfill my promise? Just so she can walk away with my dinner set while I get to drag some dead fish home. It only takes a few taps of my phone. Then a voice on the other end comes through, high-pitched and much too perky. 911. What's your emergency? Hi. How's it going? Yeah, hey, my house is being broken into right now, I say, and pray this woman doesn't know what Mr. Masterson sounds like as I give her the address. She's got a mountain of questions for me high as Everest, and I listen to myself answer them. Only I'm talking on autopilot because I'm too busy thinking about the two Jennies, old and new. How old Jenny would have called me spineless for what I'm doing now. Turning someone in while being part of the problem. How new Jenny came here tonight because she wanted to right a wrong. Because she believed in something. At least one of us has a good reason. And that gets me thinking, she can't be all bad, right? Maybe not an angel, but not all bad. She did let me have the last saucer. Maybe we just started off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could get to know each other better. Maybe then she'd even tell me her name. The operator is still talking a mile a minute when I interrupt. Hold on, I think there are 2 people in the house now. Yes, another one just joined. And when I feed her the Masterson's address again, I whisper, please come quickly. But I'll be honest with you. That last part is for dramatic effect. Just to see how long it'll take someone to show up to a fancy place like this. 5 minutes? 10? What do I care? I have all the time in the world. The operator tells me it won't be long, that they're sending someone right now to come help. She asks me to stay calm and remain where I am. So I stroll to the front door. I can hear Jenny's voice before my feet touch the porch, cussing one of the Eds out as she lugs her sack across the marble floor. Her bone china jingles in the night like a plea, begging my lonely saucer to partake. I retrieve it from my pocket, give it a squeeze, and step inside, ready to see the mistakes we've made. Hoodwinked. The only thing worse than tracing a witness 5 years after is to find out he has forgotten all about the crime, or at least the bits that matter. But Detective Syed was no greenhorn. He smiled at the 19-year-old who was sitting across the table devouring his second plate of chicken cafriel. So, is the chicken tangy enough? Yes, Detective. Thank you for buying me lunch. Daniel D'Souza grinned, his cheeks still plump with the spicy treat tucked in. Not at all. Thanks for agreeing to meet me here. Detective Syed swirled the sparkling water, then took another swig. It was a hot April afternoon, and Baga Beach looked bare. I know it's hard for you to talk about it, but what you can tell me can save a life. The fork fell into the green sauce, and the young man picked it back up. He wiped the corners of his mouth with the paper napkin Britos had stacked at every table, and met Detective Syed's gaze. Sir, I was just 14 at the time, and was visiting my uncle, and helped him in his gallery that sold souvenirs and other knickknacks. Detective Syed completed the statement, and cataloged the antiques. It was off-season, and he had very few customers walking in. So, you used to stay till the shop closed in the evening? Yes. And what time would it close? All shops in Panaji close around 8 p.m. I thought you knew it, the youngster snorted. So, you closed at 8 p.m. every evening? Yes. No exceptions? Not any that I can recall? Well, on the 30th of April, 2016, it was open at least till 9:30 p.m. Afterwards, the CCTV blanked out. Oh, it was the last day of the month. Maybe it was open for stock taking, staying open late at night after a whole day Of no business? Detective Syed cocked his left eyebrow. Detective, can I leave now? I'm not feeling too well, and I can't recall much. Daniel tried to slide out of his bamboo chair. The detective's eyes held steady. Daniel, I have not even started asking anything yet. And you know I'm going to get to it one way or the other. So, why don't you help me out here? I can be of no help to you, detective. I shouldn't even have come here. It was a mistake. Daniel got up and hobbled on the slippery sand. Detective Syed cleared his throat and said in a voice that rose above the waves that crashed outside, we went through the old CCTV footage. It shows someone coming out of the shop at 9:30 p.m. Daniel stopped in his tracks and turned. He walked back to the table and growled. You know, detective, I was a minor at the time and can't be charged with anything. True, but you could have been sent to a juvenile detention center. Could have been, but wasn't. Wait, for what? Daniel's face turned red. For whatever you didn't confess to, Detective Syed said in an even tone as he gestured for Daniel to sit down. We are not here to talk about it, though. We are here to discuss the footage we got from Tanishq Jewelry 3 days ago. Daniels sported the same look as the fish kept on the ice at the entrance. So, Daniel, how about you sit down and I'll order you a bibinka? No, thanks. I'm full. What is it that you want to know? Daniel, on the night of 30th April 2016, between 9 to 10 p.m., robbers drilled a hole in the back wall of Swarna Jewelers and hauled the stuff worth INR 8 crore with them. As you already know, it's next to Pablo's gallery. You didn't hear anything? No. As my uncle said at the time, I was not there. Daniel rasped through a clenched jaw, which we know now is not true. How can you say that? I'm sure many own a hoodie of the same brand, but I'm sure they will not be wearing one on a humid April night. And who said anything about a hoodie? What hoodie? Daniel countered. Detective Syed let out a chuckle. He knew it was the best antidote for teenage bravado. Okay, the same one that the CCTV outside Tanishq captured 3 days ago. This one should be easier to remember. Daniel's face turned pale. What is the connection between the two? You tell me. The detective parleyed in a calm voice. Okay, I was helping my uncle at the store the night Swarna Jewelers was looted. But I swear, we didn't hear a thing. We had almost finished when a man in a dark blue hoodie turned up at the store asking for a lighter. He was wearing shades, and I found that suspicious. He didn't realize I was watching him as he took out his wallet and dropped a gun. My uncle at the register could not see it, but I did. The vase in my hand fell, and the next moment, the gun was pointed at me. Okay, what happened next? I can't remember what exactly happened. Daniel's eyes were like the floodgates about to be opened. Detective Syed leaned back on his tubby chair, rocked the back of his head in his knitted hands, and cajoled. Take a deep breath and try again. That bibinka is still in the offer? I think my uncle begged him to spare me. The man asked us to turn off the CCTV, stay in the shop, and left. Was that what happened? Yes, And you left the city the next day to return after 5 years? Yes. Only the new CCTV footage we found from Tanishk across the street tells a different story. Detective Syed leaned forward and drummed his fingers on the table. Witches, Daniel sniggered. The man in the hoodie never walked out of the gallery. Daniel's eyes went wide. But you said you saw him walk out. No, it was a 14-year-old who walked out wearing a dead man's hoodie. Daniel gulped air. Detective Syed half shut his eyes, scratched his chin, and continued, and walked back into Tanishk's store 3 days ago, and quite possibly other places across Goa before that. I have a theory. He was tracked down by the fellow robbers of the dead man. They made him an offer he could not refuse. Be a part of their gang, or go to juvie for murder. Daniel's face went blank. He whispered in a trembling voice, "Nice theory. I came back as I got admission into a college in the city, which is a nice cover-up. Daniel, you don't have to tell me what happened at the gallery that night. And I think I know the reason why you wore the same hoodie. Which is, supposing your theory is correct, you wanted to be rescued. Is that a possibility?" Daniel's eyes begged, still too scared to be hopeful. "Yes, if you can help nab the gang and finish eating bibinka, the disappearance of Elizabeth Conway." Elizabeth Conway, reported missing on the 18th of November, 1986. 5 feet 5, slender build, brown hair, and green eyes. Last seen leaving school premises on the 13th of November at roughly 1600, wearing her school uniform. White shirt, navy blazer, tie, and tights. A double-breasted brown overcoat with white buttons, and a black woolly hat. First missing persons report of the victim. No previous criminal record. No records of mental illnesses. No reports of family conflict. No records of conflict at school. So, no reason to run away, thought the inspector, as he meticulously read over her profile, line by line, taking a long drag of his cigarette in between. No suspects, no trails, and no trace of the missing girl. The only lead, a Nikon F3 SLR, with a large crack streaking across its lens. There was nothing special about the camera itself. In any ordinary case, one would suspect nothing of a broken camera under a shedding oak tree, hidden in a pile of leaves. They'd tut and shake their head at the thought of an inconsiderate litterer, leaving a trail of rubbish without a speck of care for the environment. Even to the inspector, it would be meaningless litter, except it was found near the route Elizabeth would take to get home from school. Through the entrance nearest to the duck pond, to feed them the crusts from her sandwiches she refused to eat. Past the fields of goalposts where the local Sunday league teams would train. Through the heavily wooded area where the owls and squirrels nested before reaching the exit next that led to the local pub, where she would find her house on the end of the road. Yet even passing places that would often be swarming with people, witnesses, the girl seemed to have vanished without a trace. Perhaps it was his intuition and expertise that made him question the worth of the camera. Or perhaps it was his desperation to solve the case without a single suspect or lead that made him hold on to a false sense of hope. Whichever it was, he allowed himself the hint of a smile at the result of trusting his judgment as he swept his eye across the photos that hung across the dark room. The photos of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. The constable stood in disbelief at the first lead in the impossible case. Had it not been for the countless nights of sleep he lost in desperate search of a clue. And now he held on to the clue in his hands as he would his own child. It was heavy. It came with a neck strap, noticeable if she had dropped it. Clearly, it was discarded on purpose. What could the girl have seen that made her throw away such an exquisite bit of kit? He wondered. One by one, the two closely analyzed each scene from the roll of 400 films, searching for the pieces of the puzzle that was hidden within. Seems like we may have our first few suspects. The constable held the print under a blood crimson tint that dimmed across the dark room. He streaked his hands over the two girls, one who seemed tanned recently from the Mediterranean with bright blonde hair, throwing a frisbee to the other with silky black hair, who seemed to fix a jealous gaze towards a boy that lay next to Elizabeth on a picnic blanket, her head grazing his wavy brown hair. The photo had been taken in the same park Elizabeth passed through on the way to school. The inspector's hunch was correct. There had to be a clue within the photos, as few as there may have been on the roll. These three seemed to appear in a lot of these photos, especially this lad here. Suspects, maybe. The inspector spoke with a tone of sarcasm. Or perhaps constable, a concept you may not be familiar with. They are her friends? The constable growled in disapproval, unable to reply with a witty comeback, as he continued to shake his head at the photos. I don't know, Inspector. There's just something quite off about these photos, as if something isn't right in these pictures. Though he rolled his eyes at the constable's intuition, or rather, his lack of, he could not help but agree as he continued to analyze the other photos. Some, like the one the inspector had pointed out, were of her in the park. The location they suspected of her last whereabouts. The photo at the end of the wash line caught his eye more than the others. The photo of the girl walking away into the wooded area. He could not explain the cold shiver that flooded his body. Perhaps it was the faded glow around her, casting an ominous shadow in the dark winter night. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be descending into an abyss of darkness, never to be seen again. Some by the school, seemingly at the start of the day. judging by the children heading towards the building. Some by the front of her house, and a few in various random locations, such as cafes, restaurants, and cinemas. There seemed to be no pattern in the location, other than the fact Elizabeth didn't seem to travel very much, or very far, if these places she deemed worthy of photographing. Or perhaps, the inspector thought, there was a significance to these seemingly mundane locations. Either way, all these locations had previously been searched, revealing no trace of the girl. He noted the appearances of each new face he came across, analyzing body language between characters and secrets hidden behind each expression. He scanned each person in depth, as if he were questioning them in an interrogation. He knew, of course, that the basis of such assumptions would be no different to creating characters for a storybook. The balance of assumption and deduction was a fine line. Perhaps, he thought, there would be someone lurking within these photos, hidden away in the background. Someone with a vengeful eye, waiting to kidnap poor unsuspecting Elizabeth. But he dared not suggest it to the constable, at least not yet. To suspect such a thing would escalate the case to a criminal investigation. From his experience, escalating a missing persons case turned out to have severe consequences for the person who was eventually found, dead or alive. He was somewhat relieved to find no such person lurking in the background. He took a step back and sharply exhaled a cloud of smoke in relief. He tilted his head and gathered his remarks, taking another drag of his cigarette. So far, only two things seemed to correlate with the photos. One being nothing more than a hunch. He could not quite place it, but there was something familiar about many of the views in the photos. Holding a photo in one hand and taking a hit of his cigarette in another. What was this sense of familiarity he felt? It was as if he had stood exactly where the photographer had. "It's strange," mumbled the constable. "Look at it in a certain way, and you could follow the girl's daily routine. Leave home, go to school, walk home through the park, hang out with friends. Seems like she goes through life in a hurry, judging by the blurriness of the moment." The inspector grinned at the constable's remark. The quality of photography that went into the pictures was quite rushed and poorly taken. Aside from Elizabeth, the others in the pictures seemed distorted or blurry. Either the girl's skills were in dire need of improvement, or she was too consumed by her own vanity to focus on anything else in the photos. Given that she was in every single photo, the latter was more likely. Except she didn't seem to face the camera in any of the shots. His eyes fixed once again on the girl on her own, walking into the wooded area. "Tell me something," said the inspector, circling his head across the room. "What kind of photos would you take on your camera? The constable raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the inspector's attempt at small talk. Nice scenery, friends, family, pets, events, perhaps any special occasions I'd like to remember precisely. So my question is, out of a roll of 400 photos, given the cost of rolls and prints these days, why only take photos of yourself? And why such blurry ones? The hum of electricity flowed through the dark room lights, as if the room, too, was anticipating the constable's answer. Could it be, he thought aloud, that the camera may not actually belong to Elizabeth? I fear so, Constable. Now ask yourself this. The photos are blurry and poorly lit, possibly due to the zoom distorting the camera's focus, and due to the lack of flash used. So, why are the photos so poorly captured? And why does everyone in the photos seem to be doing quite mundane activities? The colors in the constable's face had suddenly bled dry as he deciphered the inspector's epiphany. You mean to tell me you see it too now, don't you? The inspected continued, masking the sense of dread he refused to succumb to. It's not the people in the photos we're after, but the photographer himself. The inspector took the last drag of his cigarette, as if to signal the constable to brace himself for the impact of his next words. A stalker. He closely narrowed his gaze at the photo at the end of the wash line, memorizing each of the minute details. These are the photos taken by Elizabeth's stalker. It all adds up. They were taken from a distance, by someone who did not want to be noticed. Except, the inspector's voice came to a ghostly whisper. Except when his eyes shifted focus away from the listening girl and onto her shadow, as a look of terror took place of the once coy smile, as if he were watching it unfold on a theater screen. He pictured the girl stopping dead in her tracks as the accidental camera flash illuminated the bushes around her, which were once enveloped by the winter darkness. He pictured the girl gingerly turning her head towards, praying it was only a trick of the light, staring wide-eyed in horror at the silhouette next to the tree. He pictured the man livid at his mistake as he tossed the camera, the evidence, as his expression changed to the smolder of a predator in the wild who had been spotted by his prey, as he pounced forward to begin the desperate chase. The inspector pictured the horror in the girl's face, living out the fear of every woman alone and vulnerable in the dark, fluidly sprinting away from the danger, lungs too strained to scream for help. He pictured the girl pounding her legs on the path, desperate to gain distance, only to be tackled down onto the damp, frosty grass. He pictured her writhing and clawing out to escape the clutches of her attacker, only to be dragged into the pitch-black abyss of the winter evening. The constable darted towards the door, coming to a sudden halt by the inspector's sharp grasp. "Let go!" he demanded. This is out of your jurisdiction now. This is now an abduction case. But the inspector only strengthened his grip on the constable, refusing to release him. Do you even know who you are looking for? We have no suspects and no other leads. If you sound the alarm now, we may never get the girl back. That stalker would know we were after him, and who knows what he'd do to the girl. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to lose the girl. It's already been almost a week. If we wait any longer, as you said, who knows what this guy could do? We'll find him. We're so close. It's all in there, the inspector exclaimed, pointing to the photos. The clues are all in there. I just know it. Somewhere in this puzzle of photos is our suspect. The constable barged the inspector to release himself from his grip. He flicked the light switch on as he began to storm out the door. His hand slammed the handle of the door as he came to a sudden stop. He held his breath and paused. He looked back at the photos hanging from the wash line. Slowly, he approached the image of the school hanging in the middle of the room. The inspector curiously watched the constable, who had his eyes transfixed on the photo he held. One by one, the constable took the photos off the wash lines and began to arrange them in order. The inspector was all but helpless to wonder what was running through the constable's mind. But he dared not utter a word as the constable ordered the photos row by row. The constable's mind raced with thoughts, frantically searching for the thing that would connect the pieces to solve this mystery. Searching for a connection that may not even exist. But he had to try, his hands shuffling, sliding and shifting through the mounts and mounts of images. Finally, the constable took a few steps back at the puzzle he had solved. Each photo laid in what appeared to be an order of brightness. They're taken through a specific route, he began. Take a look at the lighting, the shadows, and the location. The inspector, at a loss from his amazement, traced his eyes along the wash line. He watched the girl emerge from her house at first light, then wander into the school as more daylight emerged. He watched her have lunch with her friends by the cafe near the schools and walk home in the rapidly dimming light of the winter evening. It was all there in the lighting. Based on the path the photographer seems to have taken, I'd say the photos are taken in the same order as some sort of delivery route. The inspector could not help but crack a smile at the constable's genius breakthrough. It was all laid out perfectly. The route seemed to begin somewhere on Elizabeth's Road, where her house was, then to her school, taking other routes near the cafes and shopping center, finally ending at the park, where he'd presumably end his shift and watch the girl on her way home. The question is, who exactly would use a route like this? The inspector wondered. Solve the last piece of the puzzle, and we'll have our suspect. The milkman, perhaps? Unlikely, the constable answered. The milkman would be doing his route before anyone was up. A postman? Perhaps. But what would a postman be doing in a park? Surely someone would notice him hiding behind bushes and trees. An ice cream man could hide from his van. Never heard of anyone selling ice cream before school? Paperboy, again, what would he be doing in a park? The inspector dropped his head and clenched his fists in frustration. They were so close to finding their suspect. Both he and the inspector knew they had one chance at finding the suspect before the investigation became public, and before the abductor knew the police were after him. Before it would be too late for the girl. If it wasn't already, he lifted his arm to his mouth to take another drag of his cigarette. He growled in frustration as he realized he had already finished it. He needed another one badly. He needed to focus. He reached into his coat pocket and balanced the nib between his lips. The sweet cherry scent of the Marlboro had immediately begun to work its magic, even before lighting it. He took his lighter from his back pocket, but stopped dead as the flints sparked. His gaze focused on the photos once again. He knew there was something familiar about the views in the photos. He had stood exactly where the photographer had been standing. He had stood in front of the laundrette that stood opposite the cafe, stood by the bus stop near the school, and stood by the same tree in the park, all while taking the last few drags of his cigarettas before throwing the butt into the bin. "It's the bin man," he exclaimed. "Drives around the houses and schools, then goes to the park to pick up the litter." "Of course," exclaimed the constable. "No one would suspect him hiding behind trees and bushes. Anyone would think he was only raking leaves or picking up litter. Anyone would think he was only doing his job." The inspector and constable nodded in unison. Both ran for their coats, darting out the door. They had their suspect, but there was no telling what he could have done to the girl. Both raced to the car and blared the siren, knowing it may have been too late to save the girl from the clutches of her stalker. Praying the worst had not yet succumbed to her.